GOAT district, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text, that trash offer's the best. You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
Fantasyland, what is going on? It is Andrew Schellenberg at AM Schellenberg on Twitter. And tonight we are Tri-FLEXing with Theo, the OG Fantasy. What's going on, Theo? How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling awesome. It's day 2 of the NFL draft, and I had a blast watching it last night. I know you did. And it's just an exciting time for us fantasy grinders.
Yeah, I hate that we have to get some old business away, and we got to set up what we're doing, because I wish we could just dive right into kind of where we left off in our first podcast, rounds 1 through 3, and then we gave a little preview of our 4th pick. But we'll get to that, because I think that's a nice segue to the NFL draft. So what are we doing here on the Tri-FLEXiN pod on the GOAT District Podcast Network? Well, Theo and I are in a high-stakes fantasy football dynasty startup draft, Maiden draft, the new Tri-Flex format. Start 3 wide receivers and a super flex. We're doing this. We're going to run through our picks. Last week we did rounds 1 through 3. Today we're going to try to get through 4 through 10. Little recap of where we are, and then let's segue right into it, kind of how we're feeling about the NFL draft last night. Rounds 1 through 3, we went with our first pick, Saquon Barkley, then A.J. Brown, and then we brought it back with Calvin Ridley. So we did do a 2 wide receiver, 1 running back start. It is a super flex league. We know we have to start 2 quarterbacks. We'll get into that a little bit later. We ended last week's show, Theo, with a trade up. We went from the 403 to the 401. And who did we get, and how are we feeling about the NFL draft last night?
We were ecstatic. We traded up to get Najee Harris. We moved up from the 403. We traded our 2022 second rounder and the 403 to get the 401. We got Najee Harris. We thought about Nick Chubb a little bit, but we went, with a slightly younger player with more receiving upside, and we ended up getting, I think, a perfect landing spot. There's some out there that are, a little upset by the landing spot because they're worried about Pittsburgh's offensive line issues. I think that the offensive line can improve. They lost a number of players from an offensive line who's mediocre, and there's a little bit of mystery with the offensive line. But I think that it's offensive lines get better and worse in the NFL all the time. I think a year ago this time we would have all been talking about how great the Las Vegas Raiders line is, and right now we'd probably rate it as a bottom 10 offensive line. So I feel with enough confidence in Pittsburgh's coaching staff that they'll get it right. But we've seen Le'Veon Bell have incredible success under Mike Tomlin, and now we get a chance to see him get another bigger back who can catch the ball. It's an outstanding landing spot. I think Najee Harris is the 101 in most standard FFPC rookie drafts on May 8th. I think that this is enough to solidify him in the spot, and we ended up getting what in my opinion the number 1 rookie as the 4th rookie off the board. So we did well value wise, and in terms of our team build, I feel even better because Najee as our running back 2 with Saquon as our running back 1 is a potentially lethal combination. Not just for the future, but for this year as well. I think Najee will be a top 12 redraft running back when it's all said and done, and I think we're sitting pretty right now with our 2 running backs.
Oh, absolutely. So in a super flex start 3 wide receiver league, we started 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, and you're right, volume is king. Shoot the offensive line stuff into the sun, at least for us, because Najee's going to the moon. pardon the astronomy lesson there. Right, we've seen that Tomlin, right? He runs Le'Veon Bell to the ground, and his talent is great. So obviously that makes sense. Like, okay, like maybe he won't do that for a lesser back. James Conner clearly doesn't have the talent of Bell or Najee Harris, and Tomlin ran him, right? We know we can get a 3-down back out of Steelers, and so you nailed it. We're feeling great about that. Let's move on to the draft. I am sharing screen, so hopefully you guys can see the draft board. I've cut it off to show rounds 1 through 10 for those of you tuning in and watching on the YouTube. As we look at the 4th round, Theo, this was a round where I was really annoying to you. I must have pinged you.
No, I appreciate the chatter. There was some freaking out going on, but it's expected in a startup.
I'm so emotional. I live in the extremes. Everything is either the best or the worst. Luckily, you're much more level-headed. But this is a great value round in our particular draft, and I want to talk about just maybe only 2 players before our next pick. If you want to talk about more. I was pinging you about we got to trade up. We got to come back up into the 4th round. T. Higgins is falling. Hey, Theo. Okay, forget T. Higgins. We got to come up. Trey Lance is falling. Let's talk a little this again briefly here about this 4th round value, kind of where people are should be targeting players. T. Higgins 4th round, Trey Lance 4th round. I don't think that we see either of them in the 4th round again, and I think they're going potentially in the opposite directions given the events of last night. How are we feeling? What is this 4th round pocket looking like to you?
I mean, Trey Lance would have been very nice to have, especially with the news last night that he ends up in San Francisco. They put a great deal of draft capital into the trade to get Trey Lance. So I think once he gets out there with Kyle Shanahan and that loaded offense, I think he's going to produce well. I don't know how quickly he'll get on the field, but I think once he's on the field, it's going to be impressive. So in retrospect, getting Trey Lance would have been great. But again, it's what would we have had to sacrifice to move up for me.
That's right.
And I think that, the T. Higgins, there's a lot of scared dynasty managers that T. Higgins on their roster because they drafted Jamar Chase. I'm personally not down on T. Higgins. I think we've seen a number of offenses in the NFL support 2, top 15 to 20 wide receivers, and I think T. Higgins can absolutely maintain that value. But certainly if this happened again today, I believe he would definitely go behind, Terry McLaurin. He definitely would go behind DJ Moore. And he would creep back into that 5th round. So in retrospect, it was I wouldn't say it's a great thing T. Higgins not on our team, but if we had to sacrifice a ton of capital to get him, it would have been a bad thing today.
Absolutely. So luckily, level-headed Theo prevailed there on the Trey Lance on the quarterbacks, right? So we've mentioned a couple times we're here in round 5 now. Let's skip ahead. We're sitting here again. I'll say it again. Super flex league, start 3 wide receivers, and we don't have a quarterback yet. It's round 5. I think that what we've seen staring at this board, everyone, is there's a pretty clear break after Jalen Hurts, to where if you were doing these startup drafts before the NFL draft, Deshaun Watson, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance came through. But then after that, round 5 was really quiet with quarterbacks until you and I got up on the clock. I think there was a couple of options that we were thinking here. I'll let you kind of lay them out, but we ultimately settled on one that provided us a stack. So why don't you walk through, Theo, kind of what we were thinking on quarterback, and kind of if you're going to do this, I'll call it 0 quarterback strategy, right? In a super flex where you're going to punt it for a couple of rounds, what should you be looking at? If you're going to do the strategy such as ours. So walk through our pick and kind of what this 0 quarterback air quotes looks like for fellow fantasy managers.
So when we made the Najee pick, we kind of figured that the 5th round we really should absolutely take our quarterback in the 5th or 6th round. We didn't want to risk it that much. And we had come down to, we liked Matt Stafford's situation. We liked Ryan Tannehill. Tua Tagovailoa was appealing in this part of the draft. But we went with Tannehill, who's probably my favorite of the 3 for redraft and for dynasty right here. Tannehill was quarterback 7 last year. He had 33 touchdown passes in his first, full season. It was 16-game season as the Titan starter. And he had 7 rushing touchdowns. He showed a comfort level in that offense, and it gives us the the correlation play, the stack play, whatever you want to call it, with AJ Brown. So week in, week out, when AJ eats, we should have a nice bump with Tannehill. I love the idea of having that stack even in Dynasty.
Yep.
It just makes it a little more dangerous. We're basically betting on AJ Brown twice.
Yeah.
And I think Tannehill,
not a bad bet though.
Yeah, what's that?
Not a bad bet.
Not a bad bet at all. And
Yep.
I think the difference between Tannehill and the Staffords, the Tua Tagovailoas, we both kind of liked Kirk Cousins a little bit, who went at the 6'10". The difference is Tannehill has that rushing upside. He's a natural rusher. I don't think we can count on 7 rushing touchdowns every year, but I think that he'll rush for his fair share of touchdowns. And I'm fine going into the year with him as our quarterback 1. And again, where we got him, I thought was very good value. I've seen him go in the 4th round of some of these some of these Tri-Flex startups, and I think we got him at the 5'10". Beautiful. I'm fine with it.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got one quarterback on the board. That feels good. Before our next pick, you mentioned Stafford and Tua. They did go before our 603 pick, so they came. I think that there was exactly on the turn. So we ended up going at the 603 Amari Cooper. I don't want to hit you with 2 questions at once, so let's just start here. If Stafford and Tua were on the board and you were going to do a strategy like ours, you punt quarterback for 4 rounds, would we have tapped one of those guys if they had made it to us?
So I don't think we would have. I think we would have talked about it and we would have considered it. But at the end of the day, we looked at so to take it back, in the 5th round, Terry McLaurin goes at the 505, DJ Moore goes at the 507, Chris Godwin goes at the 509. So we had looked at Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, and Allen Robinson sort of as the end of a tier. Where we really want to get one of those guys. And we figured if we took Tannehill at the 5'10", one of them would come back to us on the wraparound. We ended up having 2 of them staring at us with Robinson and Cooper. Would we have gone, if the draft was today, would we have taken Allen Robinson over Amari Cooper? Possibly. With Justin Fields landing there, I think we probably would have taken Allen Robinson.
Yeah, I just started nodding my head vigorously. I just like, yeah, maybe.
I think Allen Robinson to the moon right now with Fields. But Amari Cooper is 26 years old. He's had great success in the NFL. He's attached to what we think is one of the best quarterbacks in Dynasty and in redraft, in Dak Prescott. Cooper was averaging 18 points a game in PPR through 6 weeks with Dak. When Dak goes down, it all went south for that whole offense. But Dak's back, and I think in FFPC there's a real gap between CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper. I think that CeeDee Lamb is absolutely the bet long term, but for 2021, I think Amari and him will kind of go neck and neck. I think it's kind of wide receiver 1s for the Cowboys. And I think Amari is going to, return some value to us, over the next few years. So I was very pleased to get him there. Allen Robinson would have been nice, but I'm pleased we got him there. And if you look at some of the other picks in the round after Cooper, Baker Mayfield, we weren't crazy high on Baker.
Nope.
Allen Robinson, obviously we liked, but then David Montgomery, we weren't that high on. James Robinson, we dodged a bullet there. Noah Fant was a nice pick, but then Devonta Smith, Mike Evans, Chase Claypool. I think that Cooper offers more of a solid floor than the rest of the picks in that round. So I was pleased to get him. And also, our wide receiver heavy build, we walked away with 3 wide receivers that we're very comfortable with. We have AJ Brown, Calvin Ridley, and Amari Cooper every week. We feel great about that as our starting wide receivers, and it gives us a nice cushion in terms of expected points every single week.
Absolutely, and we wanted access to that Cowboys offense, which will come up a little bit later in the show as well as a tease.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And actually, as I'm looking at the board, if you're looking at that mid-6th round, and you started to bring it up, Theo, with that David Montgomery, James Robinson, Noah Fant, I think that you can really draw 2 real lines to the left of that block and the right of that block. if you see Amari Cooper and Allen Robinson, they did go in the 6th round. I'm going to call those guys 5th round wide receivers, if you will, just for the purposes of this argument, right? Like push those guys up into the 5th round and then look at the Devonta Evans, Chase Claypool, and then almost like that's the end of the 6th round. And then almost everything that happens from there all the way to round 9, this huge block of wide receiver tier clears out. I think to your point, and you're making it right, is that Amari Cooper, Allen Robinson was the last of that very, call it like, next to elite tier. Whereas the other guys, like obviously there's going to be some studs in this next breakout. But as you're doing these tri-flexes and those rounds 6 through 9, the wide receivers really clear out. And we wanted to be way ahead of that to have our 3rd stud in hand before that started to clear out. So that way we could potentially have access to other positions that weren't wide receiver. So just some tips as you guys are thinking through your own startups.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a fair shake.
Yep. So as we were mentioning, right, end of round 6, round 7, the wide receivers are starting to clear out. We've only got one quarterback in hand, so we get on the clock at 7:10. And I think that this is not a contested one, right? It's not like hotly contested, but I think that this is one of our first ones that was a little bit harder to pull the trigger on. Theo, we end up going with a double stack, but a double stack quarterback wide receiver combo. Why don't you walk us through kind of where we landed and what happened on that double stack?
So we had discussed a few quarterbacks, namely Matt Ryan, Mac Jones, Carson Wentz. They all kind of seem to be in this tier. Matt Ryan was a reasonable gamble for us. There was, at the time that this startup started, there was Kyle Pitts or a quarterback going to Atlanta at 4. Yep. So taking Matt Ryan offered a little bit of risk to us. If Justin Fields would have been drafted at 4 last night, we would have been a little upset today. But I think it was taking Kyle Pitts was an investment in the win now approach from Atlanta. They added a unbelievable weapon for Matt Ryan. So instead of adding his replacement, they add a player that elevates his value. I think Matt Ryan becomes an appealing redraft quarterback this year. He'll be in like if you want to wait a little bit on quarterback, the guy with very high touchdown upside who will throw for a lot of yards with not a lot of rushing upside. He gives you that. So Matt Ryan is 35. He's going to turn 36 before the season. But he seems to be very solid right now in Atlanta. I would be very surprised if they move on from him after this season, unless they have a historically bad year. I see Matt Ryan having a 2-year window there with Calvin Ridley, Kyle Pitts, and hopefully they don't trade Julio Jones, and then he'd have another weapon. So I think it turned out great for us. I think in Tri-Flex drafts, Matt Ryan will be moving up. And I certainly like him a little bit more than a few of the quarterbacks that went ahead of him. And with respect to the drafters who took some of these guys like Baker Mayfield and Daniel Jones, those guys are certainly younger. But Matt Ryan, I think he's a smash spot this year in terms of the value he gives us as our quarterback too.
Yeah, Thea, how about this for good advice? Everyone should have been drafting earlier before the NFL draft. You're not going to have access to Matt Ryan this late again, and I think that we're really happy that we had him. So take that advice to the bank. You should have started the draft, your own maiden draft a couple weeks ago. That's our advice absolutely. On Matt Ryan, right? Yeah,
great advice. A time machine would be prudent for your startups right now.
Yes, everyone congratulate us for the bet that we made that you guys don't have access to.
There you go.
That's good. No, we're happy about it, right? So our starting. So we punted quarterback for 4 rounds. We got access to the Jeopardy before or I guess Wheel of Fortune before and after the Matt Ryan Tannehill combination. So we got them in our quarterback and our super flex spots. Okay, so then we come around. We're wrapping back around. You alluded to it earlier. We had a decision on the board. You mentioned Cooper Kupp, Laviska Shenault, but again, we're in that massive clear out of wide receivers. And again, guys, we're in round 8 here, so we're sending it away from ourselves. We're 18 picks away from our next pick, again, barring trades. This tier of wide receivers is great to have access to. So I guess one of the things that we talked about, right, is clearing out either being ahead of this or trading back, and maybe having multiple shots in this range. Because listen to who else was available, right? We were siding between Kupp, Chenault, Woods, Chark, Debo, Tyler Lockett, Julio Jones for our, a double wide receiver stack with the Matt Ryan. There was a lot of options on the board. You mentioned earlier, we went Laviska Chenault, kind of where are we landing? Because I think that you and I came to consensus like really quickly on Chenault versus some of these other guys.
So for me, if Kupp was there at the 803, I think we would have argued a little bit more on that. But Laviska, I like him more than most of the rookies who are getting drafted in this current draft. I think he has a great chance in Jacksonville to be the wide receiver one with a transcendent young quarterback in Trevor Lawrence and an offense that, seems to be looking on the upward swing. So for us, Laviska was not that hard of a decision. However, if you asked, 10 drafters who they would have taken from this range of wide receivers, you might have got 5 or 6 different answers.
Yeah.
It's a very, very very strong part of the draft. So I think in these Tri-Flex startups, you really want to try to walk away with a wide receiver or two in the 8th or 9th round.
Yep.
I think you're going to like the way your team looks because it certainly does dry up. I'd say after the 10th round, you start seeing guys with a little bit more question marks.
Yep. And like we said, right, we got Cooper in the door as our wide receiver 3 before this tier and this 6 through 9, 7 through 10, whatever you want to call it, starts to clear out. But having access to Laviska Chenault, or again, Debo's, the Lockett's, the whoever's right here, this was awesome to have as our wide receiver 4. And I think that we're really happy, coming away through 8 rounds with Laviska Chenault holding up the floor pretty high on a wide receiver 4 spot in this Dynasty Tri-Flex.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. And again, I think you mentioned it, right? I think that, I came to consensus on Laviska because I didn't have enough. And I think I had a lot of Debo and Lockett overall. And you made the great point that now we have $1,200 worth of Laviska exposure. Yeah,
you certainly have a lot of Laviska Chenault. You have the
Laviska exposure increased exponentially.
I have a few shares of Laviska Chenault across my dynasty teams. And it's been kind of the kind of guy that everybody's trying to trade for this offseason. Mm-hmm. But nobody wants to offer, a premium pick for him. He's kind of in that middle range where you might be able to get like the 110 for Laviska Chenault, maybe the 109. Most people are offering high seconds. So he's got to show a little bit this season, but he certainly has the opportunity. He was behind some of these guys like Brandon Ayuk, Chase Claypool, T. Higgins from his draft class, but there's no reason that he can't take a huge sophomore leap this year and be considered to be in those guys' range of players for Dynasty. So I'm pleased with getting Laviska Chenault there. He offers us immediate production and a younger player, and I feel great about it.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, through 8 rounds, Theo, we're getting up in the 9th round. We start making a list of players because right now we right now feel like open. Now we don't have a tight end premium FFPC. We don't have a tight end yet, so we start like putting together like a list of like wish list players that we've got. And I think that we got to a point where maybe we said, hey, we have 2 of the next 8 picks, 2 of the next 9 picks, whatever it was. We had Irv Smith on our radar. We thought that was the last of like a tight end tier, maybe that we wanted access to. But we really had a couple of wide receivers. I think 3 wide receivers in particular. On our list, we had Tyler Boyd, who was really falling in the draft as like a PPR guy. We can kind of talk about how Chase affects him if you want to. But we also had on our list Michael Pittman and then Elijah Moore, who hasn't been drafted yet. So we get up at the 9-10 and we say to ourselves, okay, Irv Smith went. We like a couple of these wide receivers. There's no way that they go pop, pop, pop and come off before us. We get consensus on Tony Pollard. We only have 2 running backs. Pollard's great value. Again, we want access to the Cowboys team. Hope I'm not stealing your speaking points, Theo. We take Tony Pollard, and I text you immediately without even picks going off the board. I regret this decision. Before you go, then I already regretted it, and then pop, 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 go Boyd, Pittman, and Elijah Moore. And it's just like I go in a full caps mode or all caps mode, fire emoji, instant regret all over the place. Like, what have we done? Is the draft over? Pollard's our worst pick of the draft. Talk me off the ledge that you had already done. Talk to me about Pollard, because there's a silver lining to all of this that we're going to make in a minute.
So for me, I'm pleased that we have Tony Pollard. I think Tony Pollard, again, to compare him to guys in this current rookie draft, or excuse me, to this rookie class coming in. For me, Pollard would be, if he was available, he would be drafted, probably right there with Trey Sermon and Kenneth Gainwell.
Yep.
He would go pretty high. I mean, he's 24 years old. He showed his talent last year in the games that Zeke Elliott was out. And he looks to me like a player that's rising. A.J. Dillon and Tony Pollard are kind of those elite handcuffs where drafters are going to take them within the first, 8 rounds of redraft this year. But I think that with the 17-game season, if we get 5 starts out of Tony Pollard, if Zeke takes a step back, we're looking good. We're also looking good if Tony Pollard just assumes a lot of the receiving role out of the backfield and we start utilizing him more. I think there's so many outs where this pick is going to pay off. And I think the Cowboys franchise seems to like Tony Pollard. And again, we wanted to grab a lot of pieces of good offenses.
Yeah.
And we both think the Dallas offense is going to be tremendous. So, and when you look back at it, we were a little upset that we didn't get Tyler Boyd, Michael Pittman, Elijah Moore. But, today, Tyler Boyd certainly takes a slight step back. Not all 3 wide receivers are going to be super productive in Cincinnati. I mean, I think it's a fair bet that 2 will.
And I think we know which 2.
Jamar Chase is the truth, so to speak. I mean, I think Jamar Chase is the real deal. And he ends up in an offense where they're going to pass the ball a lot and they're going to feature him. It's his college quarterback. You have the locker room narrative there. People can criticize Cincinnati for not taking offensive linemen, but they took a superstar. So I cannot hate on them. So Tyler Boyd probably takes a step back. Michael Pittman looks like a guy who could take a big step forward this year. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I am willing to bet that Michael Pittman is worth more a season from now. And then Elijah Moore has not gotten drafted yet, but I'm very high on him.
Yeah,
if we could turn things around and I could have Elijah Moore instead of Tony Pollard, we might do it. But I'm not disappointed in getting Pollard. I think that you can't. Hindsight is 20/20 in these drafts. You can't always come back and criticize the pick you made. As long as you believe in the talent of the player and the situation they're in, then you can't really second guess yourself. So I'm pleased getting Tony Pollard. Also, we did not have a running back 3, and I think he's a very good running back 3 to have, especially considering end of the 9th round for him. And if we didn't get him there, he would have gone in the middle of the 10th anyway. So it's not like we reached for him. I think that we got him at appropriate value, and I'm fine with it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I love going into skies falling mode. As I said, I live in the extreme, so I almost living in that default immediate regret mode is what gives me life and gets me going in the morning. So it was great. It was great feeling that kind of stress almost immediately. So silver lining, and I'm going to set up my own groan / if I knew where JD's reggaeton horn was, I'd say I called it silver lining earlier, but maybe it's call it silver and black eye lining. Gave us access to a quarterback in 10:03 that we weren't even considering. We did take Derek Carr at the 10:03 eyeliner, silver and black Raiders. Everyone gets it. I think that if we had taken one of the wide receivers and Pollard was on the board, I wonder if we would have came to the same last minute conclusion to get that consensus around Derek Carr. So I think that, again, going back to it, I think that taking Pollard and having the wide receivers came off the board allowed us to kind of take that step back and say, okay, what makes sense for this team? And we end up getting Derek Carr. And the punchline is, if you look at the rest of round 10, a bunch of quarterbacks started coming off the board. We kicked off a mini quarterback run. So walk us through Derek Carr wasn't even on the list of players that we were ever considering. And then all of a sudden, boom, that was the guy. That was the pick, QB3.
Yeah, so we've made with punting quarterback, we certainly were not going to get a great quarterback 3, but I think that when those wide receivers went off the board, and also Jalen Reagor went off the board at the 10:02. So when those guys went off the board, it's kind of like we had to take a hard look and try to find the value that was left. And Derek Carr was a guaranteed starter this year. He's not a great player, but he's not a bad player. If you have to start him, it's not going to necessarily ruin your week. And I think that we were pleased with it. And afterwards, immediately after we took Derek Carr, it started out this kind of mini quarterback run where the following team took Sam Darnold. Then a few picks later, Jameis Winston was taken. And Jameis is one that we actually probably prefer to Derek Carr.
Yeah.
But there's that shroud of mystery with who's starting in New Orleans. I think that if you let FFPC drafters pick their starting quarterback for New Orleans, 90% of us are going to pick Jameis Winston because he's an NFL quarterback and not some wildcat quarterback who's unpredictable for fantasy. But Derek Carr gave us a little more stability than Jameis Winston, and we certainly liked him more than Jared Goff, who went off the board at the 10:10. So it was a wise decision in the sense that it got teams to wake up and start taking quarterbacks, and hopefully leaves us value in the 11th round. And in retrospect, the one wide receiver that we would have considered at the 10:03 that was left was Hollywood Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Hollywood Brown went off the board at the 10:11. And last night they took Rashad Bateman in the first round. I like Hollywood Brown, but Rashad Bateman is a better football player, and Rashad Bateman is more of a NFL wide receiver 1. So I don't think we would be too excited about having Hollywood Brown right now. So the NFL draft has kind of really worked out for us in terms of the decisions we made, and also the decisions we did not make. So it's gone pretty well so far. And
we had a great day 1, knock on wood.
Great day one. Hopefully there's nothing in date. If Jacksonville goes and drafts a receiver that can take a little value off of Laviska, that would not be ideal. But it's I can't see anything that would really hurt us in this upcoming second and third round. So it's gone quite well, and looking forward to talking about the rest of our picks next time we get together.
Yeah, let's do that, Theo. We'll close out by saying we're through 10 rounds. We got 3 quarterbacks in the door. We've got 3 running backs. We've got 4 wide receivers. It is tight end premium. So hopefully in our next installment, we drafted a tight end. Maybe we'll see how that goes, and we'll see how long we punt tight end here in this format. Theo, it's been great talking to you. Anything else you want to close out before we end this installment of our startup draft?
No, it's been an awesome process, and I'm looking forward to having a strong close to this draft, and hopefully doing a couple more of these Tri-Flexes. It's just been awesome, and it'll be interesting to see where the ADP goes.
Absolutely.
Next weekend the ADP is going to be completely different, and I think a lot of the early startup drafters are going to either feel great about some of their picks or not so great about some of their picks, and that's the beauty about these early drafts. It's pretty awesome.
It'll hurt so good if it's coming from the opposite side. No, that's
absolutely.
Theo, this is great. You're at the OG Fantasy. Theo, I am at AM Schellenberg, Andrew, and we are Tri-FLEXiN on the GOAT District Podcast Network. Subscribe, download, listen, delete, re-download, do all that stuff. Leave us a comment, leave us a review. Theo, LFG. See you guys.
Let's go. Enjoy the draft, everyone. Take care.